While the royal visit was grabbing headlines, President Trump was on the phone with Russian President Vladimir Putin for an hour and a half. And here's what he said about Putin and Ukraine.
I think he'd like to see a solution, I can tell you, and that's good. But I had a long talk with President Putin. I suggested a little bit of a ceasefire, and I think he might do that. He might announce something having to do with that. Did he announce it yet?
Now, at that point, the Russians hadn't announced it yet. But a few hours later, the Kremlin did confirm a ceasefire to take place on Victory Day. And then Russian spokesman Ushakov added something the mainstream media buried completely. He said, both Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump have given broadly similar assessments of the behavior of the Kiev regime led by Zelensky, who is pursuing a policy of prolonging the conflict encouraged by European countries and with their support. Putin and Trump jointly assessing the problem as Ukraine and the Europeans. Now, on the previous day, King Charles, who is the premier spokesman for that problem, stood in front of the Congress and attempted to rally continued support for the Ukraine war. Now, the media has buried the import of the Trump-Putin phone call and had you focused on the standing ovations that Democrats gave King Charles. The MAGA-sphere is focused on things like indictments, the latest assassination attempt, and the Supreme Court's redistricting ruling. And all of that matters. But there's a much bigger redistricting going on. Donald Trump is redistricting the world, from superpower relations to the UAE leaving OPEC to new credit institutions being established in the United States. I'm Susan 𝓘𝓷𝓽𝓻𝓸𝓭. I've been on this case since 1971, when the British Empire tightened their grip on the world economy and the United States and led us to near destruction. Donald Trump is now reversing that. So if you want to follow that fight, please hit those like, share, and subscribe buttons so we can stay in touch and reach more people. Here's what I'm going to cover today. First, what the Putin-Trump phone call signals and what Chatham House says it means for the so-called special relationship. Second, why the UAE's exit from OPEC is bigger than anyone is reporting and what OPEC actually is. And third, the announcement of a new American system credit facility in the Pentagon, which can fuel our industrial rebirth. So let's start with what just happened between Trump and Putin. The president disclosed this call at a press availability in the Oval Office, almost in passing, and the press barely noticed what he was actually saying.
I talked about Ukraine, and I talked a little bit about Iran. I talked about a few different subjects, mostly about Ukraine, and we had a very good conversation. I think we're going to come up with a solution relatively quickly, I hope.
And then the Russian readout did confirm what the media didn't want to report, that Putin and Trump look at the situation in the same way. Zelensky is prolonging the conflict, and Europe is encouraging them to do it. This isn't the first time that President Trump has put the blame for the continuation of the war on Zelensky and his European allies. And this comes in the context of the president's repeated attacks on Britain, the EU, and NATO for sitting out the conflict with Iran. And yesterday, the administration acted and announced that it was pulling 5,000 troops out of Germany. Now, King Charles had spent the week trying to smooth over that split in his highly orchestrated diplomatic visit to Washington, D.C. But France's president, Emmanuel Macron, was far less diplomatic. He said, we should not underestimate the fact that this is a unique moment when the U.S. president, the president of Russia, and the president of China are categorically opposing Europeans. Now, Macron is not alone in announcing that things are very, very different and the post-war order is over, because the very architects of that order performed an autopsy on it at Chatham House last week, assessing the results of the king's visit. Now that the hidden hand of imperial policy has been outed and is being openly dismantled, the empire's premier think tank is increasingly honest about how it worked.
He did not actually use the phrase special relationship. A phrase that Chatham House history has it was coined right here by us and our sister organisation, the Council on Foreign Relations, when we were discussing the rise of America, the decline of Britain, and then it was given wider currency by Winston Churchill in a speech in 1946, the year he became president of Chatham House. Enough of that history, but we're proud of it.
Let that sink in. Maddox admits that the special relationship was created by a declining British Empire in order to use the United States essentially as its dumb giant. And we played that role for most of a century, until now. Another speaker admitted that it's over. General Sir Richard Barons, a former commander of the UK Joint Forces and one of the authors of Britain's Strategic Defence Review, said this.
But special does not mean that the UK and Europe are going to have the place in the American firmament that we've enjoyed certainly since 1949.
Yeah, they've enjoyed it since 1949. That's their word for it. For 76 years, Britain and its European allies have enjoyed the position of directing American military power for their purposes. And Trump just ended that enjoyment. And here's how Sir Barons concluded.
So in 1949, the US recognized it was its own interest to underpin European security in the means of NATO and has subsidized it at an extraordinary level since then, at current prices perhaps $400 billion a year. But the world has now changed. 500 million prosperous Europeans with an enormous welfare offer by global standards should not expect the US taxpayer to underwrite their security any longer. It's not coming back.
That's right. It's not coming back. The general who wrote Britain's own defense review is confirming it. The post-war order, as structured since 1949, is over, and the empire knows it. And so does Donald Trump. Our job here at Promethean Action is to make sure that you know it too. So please subscribe to our free newsletter and get the analysis that's going to let you see what Trump is actually doing so you can defend it and explain it to others. The link is in the description. Now, here's what the end of that relationship looks like economically. This week, the United Arab Emirates left OPEC, and the president had this to say about it.
I mean, I think it's great. I know him very well, Mohammed, and very smart. And he probably maybe wants to go his own way. That's a good thing. I think ultimately it's a good thing for getting the price of gas down, getting oil down, getting everything down. They have it all. He's a great leader, actually. So no, I'm okay. They're having some problems in OPEC.
They're having some problems in OPEC. To understand why that is the understatement of the last 50 years, you actually have to understand what OPEC is and who built the system on top of it. Because this goes back to 1971, when the British orchestrated the attack on the US dollar that forced Nixon to end the Bretton Woods system, take the dollar off the gold reserve standard, and let it float. What did that really mean? It meant that the dollar was no longer sovereign, and it could become a plaything for the global financier elite. And from that point on, money and resource flows were configured outside the United States to feed the imperial game at the expense of our economy and our national economic development, and the same was true for other countries as well. OPEC was part of that. It was a monopoly set up under the guidance of the City of London to manipulate supply and prices. Henry Kissinger then set up the petrodollar system, organizing the OPEC nations to conduct their business only in dollars. Those dollars then fed the offshore dollar market, controlled by the City of London, and used to turn the world economy into one big giant casino. To the extent that physical production was allowed, it took place only to feed the speculative bubble. And Henry Kissinger was pretty candid about who he was building that system for. In 1982, he went to that same Chatham House and he said, "In my White House incarnation then, I kept the British Foreign Office better informed and more closely engaged than I did the American State Department." Now, did you notice that when King Charles spoke to Congress, he invoked Henry Kissinger by name?
And that alliance is part of what Henry Kissinger described as Kennedy's soaring vision of an Atlantic partnership based on twin pillars, Europe and America. That partnership, I believe, Mr. Speaker, is more important today than it has ever been.
He was right. It was Kissinger's vision. The king just left out the fact that Kissinger was keeping the British better informed than his own government while he was doing it. And this is what makes the UAE's exit so significant. OPEC was one of the structures through which the empire worked. The Iranian regime, with its control of the Straits and its support for Islamic terrorism, was another part of the business model. The whole architecture depended on Gulf instability as the enforcement mechanism. Iran and the Strait of Hormuz were the empire's on-off switch, and every manufactured crisis drove the oil prices up, kept the petrodollars flowing, and kept London in the center of the action. Trump is taking those levers away. And with that threat off the board, the UAE is walking out of the cartel built to manage production caps and oil prices. Now, here's another element of Trump's redistricting the world: the never-ending conflict between Israel and its neighbors. And Trump's change started with the Abraham Accords, and it now includes this. The UAE, which has suffered more missile attacks from Iran than Israel, has been protected by the Israeli Iron Dome batteries and IDF sources deployed on UAE soil for the first time. So the imperial binary that kept Arab countries and Israel at each other's throats for decades, permanently dependent on outside management, just dissolved, along with the post-1971 system. That system was engineered so that sovereign productive wealth never flowed back into those nations' own development. It flowed into the offshore financial circuit through London. President Trump is shutting that down and replacing it with real economic development in the Mideast. And as we're about to see, it's happening here in the U.S., where a new American institution is now putting government credit directly back into production, and nobody noticed it. The headlines about Secretary of War Hegseth's testimony before the House Armed Services Committee focused on the fireworks about the conflict in Iran and the size of the defense budget. But here's what those headlines missed: the creation of the Office of Strategic Capital, an investment bank inside the Department of War. Here's the official statement. The Office of Strategic Capital has been established as the Department of War's internal investment bank, a novel and powerful tool for revitalizing the national security industrial base. The OSC wields approximately $210 billion in lending authority. This capital is instrumental in supporting the national security supply chain, providing the financial resources necessary for companies to scale production, invest in research and development, and modernize their facilities. This direct financial intervention helps to de-risk investment in the defense sector and ensures that critical industries have the capital they need to thrive. De-risk investment. This is similar to what President Trump said on April 20th in a series of executive orders and findings on energy, where he made clear that markets had failed to ensure our economic security. Hegseth has set up a facility to address that. That's what de-risking means. Now, this was completely ignored by both Congress and the press, but it's one of the most significant institutional developments in American economic policy in 50 years. Since the end of Bretton Woods, capital has been hijacked by the speculators, and the real economy and our national security has paid the price. The Office of Strategic Capital addresses that. It's not going to wait for Wall Street to decide whether a munitions plant or a rare earth processor will yield a quarterly return. It identifies what America needs, funds it directly, and uses that to bring private capital alongside. This is Hamilton's American system. This is what FDR used to build the arsenal of democracy. This is what the British imperial financial system has spent 80 years trying to prevent America from ever doing again. And it's happening now, simultaneous with a ceasefire in Ukraine, a cracking OPEC. These institutions are being created to rebuild our energy and economic independence. So, King Charles came to Washington last week to try to talk the U.S. back into their system. President Trump smiled and toasted. And in the meantime, he was reshaping the strategic and economic landscape of the world. Because what you watch this week is the acceleration of that system's undoing. A ceasefire call that aligns Washington and Moscow against the empire's war machine, a UAE withdrawal that cracks the Kissinger petrodollar trap, and a new American investment bank pulling government credit back into productive industry. Donald Trump is redistricting the world, and this time it's America that's drawing the lines. Promethean Action is building the movement that can defend and advance what President Trump is doing, because the empire is not going to go quietly. So join us as a supporting member or a contributor, because this is definitely the year to be in this fight. This has been your Saturday wrap-up. Thanks for watching.
Please take a moment and subscribe to our free newsletter at 𝓯𝓲𝓽𝓻𝓸𝓭𝓾.
There's one thing I'll tell you that everybody knows. The Q plan is unfolding and it's time to go. Yeah, the cabal is falling down. The cabal is tumbling 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 down, tumbling, 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 tumbling down. Yeah, the cabal is tumbling down. Everybody knows it's time to go. Yeah, the cabal is tumbling down. The cabal is tumbling down. The cabal is tumbling down. The cabal is tumbling, 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 tumbling down. Let's go. It's supper time now. Right on. There's one thing I'll tell you that everybody knows. The Q plan is unfolding and it's time to go. Yeah, the cabal is falling down. The
Oh,
cabal
yeah. Oh, yeah.
is tumbling down. The cabal is tumbling
Yum.
down. The cabal.
Hi there, Neil here, the Twisted Lightworker. I hope you find that this video was very informative and brought you up to snuff. Also check out the video that I did just on the four corners of the cabal, the four pillars of cabal. I'll leave the link to that in the description below. But this video that you just watched should bring you up to the point to understanding how important this next little while is, because the biggest changes are going to be taking place right before our eyes and in the very near future. It's happening. It's all around us. You know, when I first started making videos, it was extremely difficult finding the truth of white hat actions. Now it's everywhere. And Promethean Action, their link is in the description below. They are extremely valuable at this time because they're up to snuff big time on what's happening with the economic system, how the whole monetary system is being taken down from the cabal. The last pieces of the major pie are taking place right before our eyes. So this is the most exciting time that the world realm, this earth realm that we live in, humanity's never gone through anything like this. And it's the most exciting time because what we're going through, we're here to be part of this. We're here to roll up our sleeves and get the cobwebs out between our ears because it's going to be up to us to usher in the new world. We're the ones that are going to have to do it when the job of the White Hats is behind us and we've made it. Oh my gosh. The world is going to be an amazing place. We've got a decade or two of hard work ahead of us. But this is going to be the fun time. The last of the cleanup, the mopping up of the tiny corners that are maybe left behind. So it is time to get excited, be optimistic, be positive, stand in your power, and use the three most important gifts that Creative Source or God has given us, and that is love, power, and sound mind. Love, power, and sound mind. All three of those gifts He's given to each and every one of us. It's up to us to access those gifts within ourselves because that spark of the divine is encoded right inside your DNA. So be happy, be excited, be positive, be productive. And from the bottom of my heart, as I always do, I'm going to close this video off with a big thank you for those of you who have supported my channel. Like, share, subscribe, get the videos out there. I try to make them entertaining as well as enlightening, as well as empowering. So if I do any of those things, buy me a coffee. The Buy Me a Coffee link is in the description below. And a big thank you to those who have already bought me a coffee. Join my channel. Find me on Telegram. I spend a lot of time on Telegram. And the links where you can find me are all in the description below. You know, always check the description of every truther, every podcaster. Check the links in the description. Don't just watch the video and run, because there's always gems in the description, and I always have some. So check them out. Promethean Action links is down below. And as always, my friends, I truly, from the bottom of my heart, from the center of every cell, from that spark of the divine that's inside each and every one of my strands of DNA, I wish you and yours peace profound.